Hey, everybody. You are about to hear a brief retelling of the movie The Killer. Enjoy the movie. Having failed in his assignment, an assassin kills all the people involved in the order. The action of the movie begins in Paris, in a rundown apartment where the nameless assassin is at ease. The assassin waits for several days for his victim, admiring the beauty of the city from the window, listening to music, doing yoga, and having conversations. Once in a while he goes out disguised as a tourist to stock up on food and chat on the phone with his superiors. The killer warns he'll wait a couple more days before calling it off. The target never showed up. After the conversation, the disposable smartphone is crumpled by the powerful heel of the rugged man so that no one can trace the signal. Back at the hideout, the assassin views passers-by through the prism of a telescopic sight. In it, people seem less annoying. In the evening, the man is packing his sniper rifle when he suddenly hears footsteps outside the door and the rustling of a key in the keyhole. Grabbing the weapon, he sneaks to the entrance. The door opens and the letter carrier lazily throws a stack of mail through the crack and leaves, without getting a welcome piece of lead to the head. Without waiting for his target, killer goes to sleep on a window-level table. From time to time, he wakes up to make sure no one has entered the house across the street. On one of these awakenings, he notices a commotion. The maid is preparing the room for check-in. Time to work, the killer realizes, and reassembles his rifle. Leveling the table at a convenient height for shooting, killer waits for the object. The one appears in the company of a girl of low moral principles, but high financial rates. Killer carefully prepares for the shot, burying drops in his eyes, equalizing the pulse with breathing techniques. The killer watches through the lens of the scope, waiting for the right moment. The chance comes when the dominatrix walks out to the client. The killer aims for the head, pulls the trigger. The bullet flies and nails the prostitute who made a careless step, not reaching the right head. Realizing that the task has failed, the killer promptly leaves the lair. Downstairs, wearing a helmet for disguise, he unbuckles his moped and rides away, trying not to meet the police cars that swarmed like flies on honey. Pirouetting through the Parisian streets, the man gets rid of the weapon, dumping it in various places, including the back of a garbage truck. Having wandered through narrow alleys enough, the mercenary leaves the moped and goes on foot, throwing his helmet into the river. In the nearest public restroom, he washes himself thoroughly to wash off the smell of gunpowder gases and changes into clean clothes. Then he goes to the airport, throwing the last gun into the trash at the entrance, having previously sprayed it with a special spray. Noticing police officers with a dog near the check-in desk, the man goes to the restroom and washes himself thoroughly once again. After checking in, he calls his boss on his disposable cell phone for further instructions, but there are none. Having stomped on the device in the toilet, the killer waits for boarding. Already in the cabin, he notices a suspicious passenger in dark glasses. Later, he sees him at the customs control, a very suspicious coincidence, as if they were not on the same flight. Noticing him again in the waiting room, the killer decides to accept the offer of the overloaded company and fly out the next day in exchange for a paid stay in a hotel, and then sets sound traps made of a plate and a glass so that no one enters unnoticed. He spends the night sitting in a chair with a knife on the nightstand. The next day, having waited for no one on his soul, the man goes to the Dominican Republic, where he has a secret hideout on the ocean. When he arrives at the address, he notices boot prints and a mountain of cigarette butts at the entrance. Someone was sitting in ambush and grabbed a gun from the glove compartment. The killer carefully runs to the house, fearing that the uninvited guests are still waiting for him. Inside the bungalow, he finds signs of a struggle and bloodstains, but does not find his girlfriend. Having found out on the phone that she is in intensive care, killer runs to the hospital. There sits the girl's brother, who tells everything he has learned from his sister. The attackers were two men and a woman. Their purpose was not robbery at all. The victim managed to stab the man in the leg and run into the woods. There she spotted a green cab in which the attackers left. The killer stays with his girlfriend in the ward. The doctor says that the girl's condition has stabilized so that she is moved to a private clinic. The killer gives the doctor money, but she doesn't take it. When the girl comes to her senses, she confesses that the attackers were looking for him, but she did not tell them anything. Right after that, the killer turns on John Wick mode and digs up a special safe in the garden, full of all sorts of interesting things. He packs a suitcase with a bunch of fake documents, weapons, and clean clothes. After which he sets off on a hunting trip. Driving around the city, killer tracks down a green cab. The search leads to the right cab park, where he breaks in at night, threatening the guard with a gun. Using a computer with an interface straight out of Fallout, the killer learns the name of the driver who took the order at the time of the attack. Grabbing his file and some change from the cash register to fake a robbery, the man leaves. In the afternoon, he sends a package to the driver's name to see who will pick it up from the taxi stand. Having noticed the boy, the killer later gets into his car disguised as a passenger. During the ride, he pulls out a gun. The cab driver gives him his wallet, believing it's a simple robbery, but the passenger wants information about who he brought to his house. The driver tells him about a couple, an older woman and a muscular jock. Having learned all that is necessary, killer orders to turn under an overpass where they put a bullet in the back of the driver's head in cold blood. Then he goes to the airport where he flies to New Orleans under another assumed name. There he rents a van under a different name, indulging on the way in memories of how a certain Professor Hodges convinced a young law student to go to the dark side. For the money, the cookies, and the chance to nail people. In a rented van, the killer goes to one of his warehouses where he keeps an arsenal and a bunch of ancillary items, like fake license plates. Next stop on the journey, a host goods store where he stocks up on trash cans and other tools. Dressed as a garbage man, killer is on duty outside the office of his boss, Professor Hodges. He sees Dolores' secretary going to work. The killer enters the building disguised as a janitor, along with a mail carrier to keep his face hidden. He walks through the door with him on the right floor. Killer counts the number of seconds it takes to close the door to Hodges' office. When the courier comes out, he manages to grab the door and walk inside. Dolores immediately recognizes him and understands that he came not to drink tea. The mercenary orders to tie up the boss and to fasten herself with a clamp in the restroom. The killer needs the contacts of the customer of the failed assignment and the cleaners who tried to eliminate him. Using a pneumatic nail hammer, he destroys 2 of Hodges' laptops where data on the illegal work was stored. He then puts 3 nails in his boss's chest, reminding him that he will soon die if he doesn't get help. But if Hodges gives up the customer, he uses his mutant magnetism to pull the nails out and call an ambulance. The boss, however, holds onto a carefully placed newspaper, bleeding to the last. When he draws his last breath without saying anything, the killer drags a trash can to remove the body. Then he goes to the restroom where Dolores pops a pack of pills hoping to fall asleep quickly, but miscalculates the dosage. The secretary offers him a deal. She'll give him her clients and executors, and he won't hide her corpse. Then the kids can get insurance, which won't happen if she goes missing. He accepts. They go home with Dolores where the killer rummages through a file cabinet until he gets 3 cards with 3 names on them. 2 co-workers, 1 customer. Leaving the room, the killer breaks a woman's neck in front of the stairs, faking an accident. Then he returns to the warehouse where he methodically dismembers Hodges' body. Later, while taking a ferry, the man carefully dumps a bucket overboard with his boss's severed fingers and teeth. Without them, the body is much harder to identify, and he buries it in a deserted place. After spending the night in a cheap motel, the killer thoroughly washes off all the evidence at a self-service car wash. He then returns the car to the rental company. Under a new identity, he rents another car and heads to Florida, to the first of 3 addresses. As he drives by, he sees the target training a pit bull in his yard. Killer makes a simple plan. He stocks up on ground beef, sleeping pills, and a bottle of beer. Then returning to the target's house, he takes a nap in the car until the evening, when friends arrive to pick up the target. After following them to the casino, the killer notices that the target is limping, a knife wound from a friend. After waiting for the target to return, the killer follows to put the plan into action. After waiting a while, he goes to the fence to attract the attention of the dog, who throws over the fence stuffed with sleeping pills. After waiting for the barking to subside, killer sets out. He cautiously sneaks into the house looking for a rival, but the rival finds him before he does. A fight ensues in which the firearm is quickly found on the floor and rolled under the bed. The big guy beats up the intruder to decide once and for all who is an assassin and who is a pathetic Templar. The assassin has to run all over the house, beating him off with improvised objects. He almost succeeds in strangling the target, but he insidiously falls on his back, crushing him with his own weight. An iron poker comes into play, a somewhat equalized weight class, but even so the guest cannot win. The host throws him to the floor, nails him with an upturned table, and grabs the barrel. In a deft move, the killer pushes him onto the wooden table leg with his heel. Just like an unconventional vampire. The guest takes advantage of the hiccup and hides behind the kitchen cabinet. Distracted by a discarded shredder, the killer runs to the bedroom where he dropped his gun. The wounded thug follows him, but finds a bullet through the closed door, followed by Killer, who comes out to make a control shot in the head. Professionals have their own standards. The sound of the gunshot is a sleeping pit bull. The animal rushes into the house where he sniffs the owner, realizes what's going on. Not wanting to take the sin on his soul by killing the pet, Killer makes a foot escape at the very last moment, throwing a bottle with a Molotov cocktail to cover his tracks. Killer gets back in the car and drives off. Next stop, New York. In the suburbs, he tracks down a woman who looks like a cottonmouth. Late at night, she leaves her house and drives to a restaurant, not noticing the stalker with bad intentions even when he meets her at a stoplight. When the victim stops at the restaurant, the killer joins her table. Offering to taste the lead dessert, realizing that it's useless to try, the woman asks permission to taste the last meal, which she generously dilutes with alcohol. In the process, she talks a lot, hoping to put the silent man's vigilance to sleep, and also tries to defuse the situation with an anecdote. After one last drink, the killer takes the woman out for some fresh air. Going down to the embankment, she trips and falls. She reaches out her hand asking for help, but is shot in the forehead. As she falls, a knife is seen in her left hand. She wanted to surprise the assassin with a hidden blade. The next target is a client in Chicago. Arriving there, the killer follows a billionaire named Claiborne to choose a plan of action. The killer enters the closed parking lot of an elite residential complex. When the car drives out of there to collect information about door locks, he orders an electronic key duplicator on Amazon, and then passes by the billionaire's driver to visually assess his physical data and approximate level of fitness. Killer walks into a fitness club where the target works out and signs up for a one-week trial membership under one of many names. He then contacts a local gun dealer to purchase a gun for personal use. After receiving a package from Amazon, he prepares for a retaliation operation. On the appointed day, Killer goes to the fitness club, clipping an electronic key card from a stray janitor in the process. In the locker room, he overhears Claiborne talking to a personal trainer. When they go to work out, the killer opens the billionaire's locker using the janitor's pass to retrieve an electronic key to the apartment and copy it on a cheap device. With the key back in place, the killer leaves the fitness club. In the evening, after waiting for the gate to be opened by a food delivery man, the killer gets into an elite apartment complex with the help of the copied key. He gets to the billionaire's apartment and enters it. He is chatting on the phone, but when he sees the armed guest, he realizes that it is better to interrupt. The killer accuses the old man that he sicked his colleagues on him after the failure in Paris, but Claiborne denies his involvement. It's the first time he's ever asked for such a favor and doesn't know how things work. According to him, Hodges himself offered to fix it, without specifying how exactly, as there is no personal disagreement between them. For some reason, the killer decides to let the customers live, but reminds them that if the billionaire sends his mercenaries after him, he'll come back and punish him severely. The killer returns to the Dominican Republic, where he lives with his girlfriend, slowly getting used to his well-deserved retirement. At least until the sequel, where the movie ends.